us to go through and practice a little bit with some of the simplifying with the exponents before we actually go through and look at 7.1. Just want to make sure that we know what to do with these exponents. Now, I will tell you I gave you some that were pretty tough here, so just a heads up on that. Okay, so looking at this first one, I'm going to go ahead and raise everything here to the fourth power. So 2 to the fourth power is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is 16. And then x to the first to the fourth power, I multiply them, so I'll get x to the fourth. Now since I've got the x to the ninth and the x to the fourth both on the top there, I'm going to add the exponents and get x to the 13th. And now I've got some in the top, some in the bottom, so I'll go through and subtract. So I'll have 16x to the 10th. Now see how I had multiple steps in here? You might have that. Make sure you think about what you need to do. Okay, looking at my second one here. This first fraction, it looks to me like I can simplify some with division. I'm going to do that first. And while I'm doing that, I'll also raise this second parentheses to its power. So looking at the first one, I have 4 minus 1 is c to the third. And here I'll have 3 minus 2 is d to the first. Now I don't have anything left in the bottom. I think I'll just put a 1 there because I do think I'll have a fraction here. And then I'm going to raise these to the power. So I'm going to multiply, so d to the 6th over c to the 9th. Now this is great, but I can do better because I can multiply these together. So I have c to the third, d to the 7th over c to the 9th. Probably didn't do anything there. And then I'll subtract my exponents to finish this thing off. So 3 minus 9 is a negative 6. Since it's a negative exponent, I'll put it in the bottom to take care of that negative. Okay, now this one is pretty tough. I would suggest, if possible, if you can simplify inside your parentheses, that's probably a good place to start. So that's what I'm going to start out by doing. Now I'm going to take care of these negative exponents first. So I'm going to move that one to the bottom, this one to the bottom, and the z to the negative 4 to the top. Then I'll simplify anything that I can simplify. So with the x's, I'll have 1 minus 2 is a negative 1. So x to the first in the bottom. The y's I'll combine here, adding them up because I'm multiplying them together and get y to the fifth. And the z's I have 4 minus 3 is 1. So z to the first. Now let me erase this extra here. Now that's still raised to the negative 3 power. I haven't done anything with that negative 3 yet. Now I'm going to take care of the negative and then the 3. So to take care of the negative, I'm going to flip this fraction. What's in the top goes to the bottom, what's in the bottom goes to the top. That'll take care of that negative that belongs to all of this. And then I'll raise everything to the third power. So 1 times 3 is x to the third, y to the 15th, over z to the third. Can't simplify anymore, so I'm done. Now these aren't so bad once you get your mind around them, but sometimes getting your mind around them is a bit of a challenge. So make sure, even if you get frustrated, you got to push through a little bit because it is kind of, you got to get your mind around all of the little details here. So make sure you're working hard at this. Okay, so let's talk about 7.1. This was a little bit of practice before we look at 7.1. Now what we're going to do in 7.1 is we're going to simplify. Now I'm going to actually start with this one right here. If you're talking about the square root of 49, what you're looking for, since this isn't understood too, and you could probably do this one in your head, is you're looking for a pair of 2 of a kind so you can pull it out. So I've got 2 7s in the 49. 49 is 7 times 7. So I can simplify that to 7. Now I want you to notice that I just put a positive 7. if they give you a square root, they're asking you for the principal root, which just means the positive value. Now, if you take a square root and use that symbol, you don't have the luxury of only using the principal root. So this is only if they give you the square root symbol, not if you take the square root of something. Now, if you're talking about the fourth root, and any root other than square root, they have to write the root in there. They're talking about groups of 4 of a kind. So we're not talking about square root of 81 being 9. We're talking about fourth root. I'm going to break this down a little bit more. See how in my 81 I have 4 3's? The fourth root of 81 is 3. Okay, now I saved this one for last because of the negative here. Now, if you've got a negative on an even root, you're not going to be able to do it. However, if it's an odd root, you will. Now, let's just deal with the 27 first. So 27 is 3 times 3 times 3. To get a negative 27, it would be negative 3 times negative 3 times negative 3. So the cubed root of negative 27 is negative 3. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take the square root of this, and we'll worry about this other stuff here in just a second. So I'm going to just put down 6 x's. Let's see, that's 5, 6. Now, if I'm looking for groups of 2, because if I don't have a root written there, it's understood to be a square root, I've got 1, 2, 3 groups, which means I can simplify that to x to the third. Now think about that, make sure you're okay with that before I kind of go on to this other stuff. So I had 6 x's, groups of 2 of them, so I could pull out 1, 2, 3 groups, or x to the third. Okay, now let's just say in this example that our x value was negative 2. Now that means that inside my square root I would have negative 2 to the 6th power. Now here's the issue with that. Negative 2 to the 6th power is negative 2 times negative 2 times negative 2 6 times. 6 negatives is going to end up being a positive value. What we need to make sure happens here is we end up with a positive answer, because you're not going to be able to get a negative one. So I'm going to just put absolute values around this to make sure that I end up with a positive value. Now here's when you need to make sure you use absolute values, because it won't be an issue in other situations. You need to have absolute values if your root is even. So here's the 2, it's even, and your exponent is odd on your answer. That's when you could have a problem with your positives and negatives. Okay, so even, answer, odd exponent. Okay, so let's go through and simplify a few of these, starting with this one. So square root of 4 is 2. Now remember, if we're looking for groups of 2 here, it's square root, understood if it's not written. And when I take the square root of x to the 6th, that's 5, I've got 1, 2, 3 groups, so x to the third. Now same as before, I do need to put absolute values because the root's even, the exponent's odd. Now I want you to notice here, to get your 3 groups, it's basically how many times 2 goes into 6. It goes in 3 times, so that's kind of your shortcut. Okay, second one, now this one's cubed root, a 3 right here. On cubed root, you don't have to worry about absolute values because it's an odd root. You only have to worry about it on the even roots, even and then odd. Here we're starting odd, so we don't have to worry about it. So when I simplify my a to the third, I'll have 1a because it's one group of 3, b to the second. because I have 6 b's, so I've got 2 groups of 3. Now I don't have to worry about absolute values because this is odd. So if it's odd, you could end up with a negative answer like we did on that negative 27 a few minutes ago. Okay, now we're doing a 4th root here. So I would say 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 8 2 times. Okay, now I do need to worry about my absolute values this time because the 4 is even. So I need to worry about it when I have an even and then odd. This is to the 1st power. And I don't have to worry about it here because if anything's squared, that automatically takes care of the negative because something that's squared, 2 negatives make a positive. Okay, and then here's my last one. Now I want you to see that I didn't give you an exact number here. I gave you 5n. So what I'm going to say is, well, 5n goes into 5n one time, so I can pull out 1x. Now I don't really know if my root is positive or negative. I mean, not positive or negative, even or odd. So I'm going to assume that it's a problem and use the absolute values. Alright, so make sure that you practice on these. We'll probably do a few in class because these can be a little bit tricky. Alright, so that's 7.1 and a little bit on practicing the